So the first bill in this package is 1683, which is the supplemental transportation omnibus bill. Chair Hornstein. Good morning, Chair Hornstein.
Good morning, Chair Moran and members.
Would you like to move House File 1683 to get the bill before the committee?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to move House File 1683 to be re-referred to the General Register.
Thank you. So let's hear about your bill, and then we'll take up your amendments.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam Chair and members. So House File 1683 is this year's supplemental omnibus transportation policy and finance bill. I'd like to thank the members of our committee who are on this committee, and also Representative Petersburg as the lead. We had a target of $225 million, and then that was for the first biennium, and another 100 million of that also in the tails. And our real goal this year, Madam Chair and members, was to match the very significant historic federal infrastructure bill that was passed late last year. That's known as the Investment, Infrastructure, and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. In order to access that historic federal amount of federal money, really the most in an infrastructure bill from the federal government since the New Deal, we have to match that money in order to access it. And so $80 million of this bill is for that purpose, and I think that is the #1 priority here. And we have certain specific areas that we would like, that we set some guidance and parameters on, but leave a lot of flexibility within this bill for the state to access those dollars. The second item that is of significance in this bill is money to support the NLX passenger rail line from Minneapolis to Duluth, and that is approximately $85 million. And then the remainder is for a number of different projects, primarily focused on, one of our main focuses was on safety. We have an epidemic of significant fatalities and injuries on our roads. 502 Minnesotans lost their lives. We have a significant number of provisions related to highway and traffic safety, transit, support for townships and small cities. This is a bill that covers all parts of the state, all modes of transportation. There's also trunk highway bond funding for critical bridge supports. That's $80 million, and then $69 million for various MnDOT facilities. So that is the broad overview of the bill. I'm happy to answer questions. I also have an author's amendment.
All right, so thank you, Chair Hornstein. So you have the A40 Amendment?
Correct, Madam Chair.
Please move it and explain it.
So, Madam Chair and members, I'd like to move the HF1683 A40 Amendment. And this amendment does three things. Number one, it fixes some engrossing errors in the appropriation amounts. Secondly, it creates a new reintegration driver's license. This is a new type of limited license for individuals being released whose license had been suspended, canceled, revoked, or denied due to a violation that occurred prior to their incarceration. And this is House File 4571 from Representative Pinto. This was heard in our committee. We had this originally in our bill in the walkthrough, but we pulled it back because we didn't have a fiscal note. And I don't like to move finance bills out of our committee without the fiscal note. We have received that fiscal note. It has gone through several revisions over the break. We now have it in a form where I believe it accomplishes the need to fund this program. There is no general fund impact. So that is the second part of this amendment. And then finally, we make some technical corrections to the ignition interlock language that has been previously passed. So That is the author's amendment.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions on the amendment? Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just asking because I'm on public safety and we didn't hear this portion about incarcerated folks getting licenses back. And help me understand it, Chair Hornstein, is this, have they been reinstated? Or is this in addition? I don't quite understand what you're doing, because if their license has been suspended, revoked, all of those sorts of things, but now you're giving them a license back, what is the license able to do? Or is it a full reinstatement?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what you're doing.
Thank you. So thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I feel, so a couple things. Number one, and we have some experts here that can answer that question. I was hoping we would have Representative Pinto because it's his legislation, but I'll do my best. My understanding here is that this only lasts for a year. There are some accountability measures when one receives this license. It's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, for folks to reintegrate. Transportation is a critical part of this, and so they would be able to, move around as anyone else would. And then also an ID, for employment, for housing. One of the reasons I support this so strongly is I think that reintegration lessens successful reintegration lessens the rate of recidivism, and it's a very good public safety measure. And I'm glad that you brought public safety to this, because we did check with, we had some interest in making sure that both the public safety chair and even judiciary saw this as a transportation issue, not so much a public safety direct issue, and we were able to keep it in our committee based on those conversations. But to your question, we do have Ms. Odegaard here, if that would be helpful. You could probably get some more specifics.
And Representative O'Neill, we do have Representative Pinto, who can also.
Oh, he's online.
Yes, he's online.
I didn't see him present here. Sorry about that.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative O'Neill may have had her question adequately answered. I think Chair Hornstein did a terrific job with that. But if she has further questions about the proposal, happy to answer them. I'll just note that, yes, this really is a transportation provision. It's just that it has wonderful spillovers in terms of public safety and community safety. These are people who are no longer in custody, they're no longer in prison. What they are is out in our community, and the issue is, do they get a driver's license or not? And that's an issue that is a transportation issue. But again, happy to discuss it further.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm still confused. So there's a whole process to be reinstated with DVS. And I'm just asking, is this superseding that normal process to be reinstated with your driver's license, or certain parameters that you have to meet? And or is this just a streamlined, quick, here's your ID? Now, I understand the whole issue of the ID. Had it been only an ID, which we talk about in public safety quite a lot, that's one thing. But if this is reinstating their driving privileges, that is yet a completely different thing, which I would have a problem with, and I couldn't support the amendment. So, I mean, I don't understand. Are we just superseding all of the parameters that are in place already to get reinstated, or is this following the normal procedures to get reinstated?
Do we have anyone in the audience who can respond to Representative? Please come up.
Oh, Anna.
Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee. Could you please introduce yourself and proceed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Anna Odegaard, and I'm the director of the Minnesota Asset Building Coalition, and I've been working in partnership with a number of other organizations to support this legislation. And I would love to respond to Representative O'Neill's question.
Please.
Representative O'Neill, we modeled this on the limited license program that's already existing in statute. It's Chapter 17130, that allows individuals with exclusions for particularly serious, dangerous driving violations. So excluding those folks from eligibility, it allows certain folks who are suspended or revoked to access a limited license for the purpose of getting to work or to treatment or et cetera. What we recognize is that folks coming out of incarceration likely would not qualify for that limited license because often they have to have a job and housing in order to specify where they will be driving to and from. And the issue with folks coming out of incarceration is that their whole project often is to reestablish stable housing, find employment, and then, of course, meet all the other requirements of their supervision, which may be treatment or et cetera. So we modeled this, the eligibility matches up exactly with the limited license program in terms of, so just for instance, if someone's license is canceled as an inimical to public safety, they're not eligible for this program. If they are, if their license is suspended related to a child support payment issue, they're also not eligible until they resolve that issue. And then there are several criminal vehicle operation statutes, and if their violations were related to criminal vehicular operation, they're not eligible for this. So this is mostly people who have unpaid fines and fees from prior to being incarcerated. Sometimes there are folks who, they actually come out of incarceration, they pay the fines and fees for prior traffic tickets, and as a result of those payments, they are suspended as a habitual violator. But those were for violations that maybe happened several years ago prior to incarceration. They might be insurance-related violations or folks who would be able to be reinstated but for being able to pay the reinstatement fee. So folks in those categories would be eligible for this reintegration license for 1 year, and it's kind of a one chance and you're out. So if they commit any additional violations that would lead to a suspension or revocation of a license, then their reintegration license would be canceled and you can't apply for it a second time. But it is kind of a one chance, 1 year license for folks who don't fall into those more serious driving categories, but who really need that license to meet the requirements of their supervision and don't have the payment, the financial resources to get that license.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the indulgence. Just one last quick question, just about the fee. So the fee is also waived then, the reinstatement fee?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Odegaard.
Thank you. Representative O'Neill, if in the case where somebody holds onto their reintegration license for a full year, there's no fee up front, when we were very specific about that, because of course that's a barrier for a lot of folks. There's no fee up front to get the reintegration license. If they're able to hang on to that license for a full year, they're not reincarcerated and they don't commit any additional violations, then they're eligible to apply for their full driving privileges to be reinstated. They do need to pay the applicable license fees for a new driver's license, but they would not need to pay any old reinstatement fees. They would just need to pay the new fees that I think we all pay when we renew our license.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Johnson.
Chair Moran, Representative Hornstein, I have a lot of concerns with this bill, or this amendment, this portion of it. If I'm reading through it, and I read through it last night, and cross-reference all the statutes in it, and I found out that if you have your license revoked or suspended for some of the offenses that are included in this, you spend 180 days in the county jail, you get your license back. But a person that doesn't might have to wait a year to get their license back. This should be vetted a lot better in the Public Safety Committee. And I'm going to make a motion right now that this goes to Public Safety because there is a huge public safety issue on this.
Ms. Odegaard, would you like to respond?
Madam Chair, thank you, Representative Johnson. So
I think Madam Chair,
Hornstein.
Ms. Odegaard wanted to respond if that's okay.
No, yes.
Okay.
I gave her permission. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. We did align the waiting periods. So there are waiting periods in the limited license provisions in 170-130. But for instance, for criminal vehicular operations, there are additional waiting periods, some of them up to, I think they're 6 years, 8 years, 10 years. And we were very clear in the legislation that if someone had a violation that was related to criminal vehicular operation, they would need to have fulfilled that entire waiting period before they could be eligible for this reintegration license.
Okay, thank you. Representative Pinto, would you also like to chime in on Representative Johnson's concerns?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Johnson. I'll just note that, this is a situation where someone has been put in custody for something that they have that they've done. We are holding them accountable. And then when they get out, the question is fundamentally a question within the Transportation Committee's jurisdiction, which is that do they have access to this limited license that is parallel to the limited license that currently exists under transportation statutes? And are we going to give them this kind of provisional time where they can demonstrate that they are trustworthy, that it can all work, and that at the end they can have a regular license that they pay a full fee for? But let's remember that when somebody gets out, we want them to be integrated in our society. We want them to be working, et cetera. But again, these fundamentally are fundamentally transportation questions within the jurisdiction of that committee. Of course, there are public safety spillovers, as there are in all sorts of things that we do. But I would argue against, and having checked in with Chair Mariani, that there'd be a need for this to be a decision to be made within the Public Safety Committee, because this is fundamentally an issue of driver's licenses, which is a transportation issue. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Representative Pinto. I have Representative Liebling. Would you like to speak to this?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just would like to speak to it on the procedural grounds. I don't think it's in order to make a motion to move an amendment to another committee. If there's a motion on a bill, that's one thing, but you can't make a motion and move amendments from one committee to another. If you don't like the amendment, your remedy is to vote no on it. So, Madam Chair, I just wanted to speak up to urge you to just rule the motion out of order. We're debating the amendment, and we should vote on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Liebling. I appreciate that information. And just finally, let's see if we can get Chair Mariani to speak on this.
Morning, Chair, members. Well, I do think that Representative Liebling, Chair Liebling, is correct. That would be my procedural advice at this point. I assume if the amendment were to go on, then Representative Johnson can redirect the motion of the future path of the bill, I suppose. But I do want to add, I think Representative Pinto really characterized correctly how we thought through and distinguished appropriate jurisdiction for this issue. I am convinced that this is a jurisdictional issue for how we administer our driver's licenses. And I do believe that the bill, the language before us in the bill, is actually pretty tightly constructed. I think it's pretty smartly constructed so as to not create any kind of conflict with the appropriate penalties, what individuals do to our society by virtue of having committed a wrong. That's taken care of, by their having met their sentence. And so there's no, crossover in terms of mitigating that criminal punishment. And so what we're left with then really is an administrative decision that's under the purview of the Transportation Committee in this legislature by virtue of being under the purview of the Department of Motor Vehicle Services. So I'm sorry for belaboring it, but just to emphasize the point that as chair of the Public Safety Committee, I see no compelling reason for us to entertain this language if there is a subsequent motion to move the bill back to or over to Public Safety.
So I want to thank everyone for their advice. I'm going to rule Representative Johnson motion out of order, and we will move forward and we will vote on the amendment as is and have it attached to the current bill. Representative Johnson.
In doing some checking, I understand that once this amendment is added, then motion to re-refer it, the bill is in order, so I will we'll probably be doing that at that time. But again, I have concerns. Last year, we, for ID purposes in the Public Safety Committee, we changed the policy because the number of individuals in the Department of Corrections custody needed an ID. So we provided their prison ID to be used for identification purposes until they could get a obtain by application a state ID card or a driver's license should they pursue that. Now we're giving it to them without cost. Going through this, while a person that wants to get a limited license has to pay fees, in this bill, for re-integrated driver's license, the commissioner cannot impose the fees. This is absolutely ridiculous. You're treating those that are incarcerated better than the citizens who follow the laws.
Representative O'Neill, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I should have just finished my thought after I heard the explanation of this bill, essentially, as an amendment. I actually don't have a problem with this. I've worked on this type of legislation before. I've worked with Ms. Odegaard before. I just wanted to be clear what we were doing, and once she cleared up exactly what it was and what it was patterned after, and where the reinstatement fees come in, I don't actually have a problem with this at all. I should have just finished that thought after she described everything. So I just want to make that very clear, because I have worked in this area of law a bit before. So I have an understanding of this, and I don't have a problem with this addition. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative O'Neill, for that clarity. So seeing no further questions on the A40 amendment that is before us, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed say nay.
Nay.
The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. So no other amendments were pre-filed. House File 1683 as amended is before us. Are there any other questions for the author or nonpartisan staff or general comments to the bill itself? Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Representative Hornstein, and feel free to defer to staff. On the bottom of page 54, the top of page 55, this is Article 3, Section 44. This is related to including suicide as a eligible or a qualifying condition for a death benefit. I'm familiar with this bill because Representative Hansen, unfortunately is not here, is the chief author of House File 4627. It looks like it's the same objective, but the language is somewhat different. Do you have a resource, either Representative Hansen or nonpartisan staff, who can kind of compare it to that version of the bill?
Chair Hornstein.
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, yes, I would want to defer, but just for the benefit of the committee, this relates to benefits related to PTSD as it relates to officers in the State Patrol. So yes, maybe if there is some expertise that could answer Representative Garofalo's question. I don't know if it would be Mr. Burris or anyone else who would have.
I think we have Mr. Burge, who's available to speak on it. Oh, he's remotely.
Madam Chair, members of the
Burge.
committee.
Yes.
Matt Burris with House Research. Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, yes, I haven't done a careful comparison recently of the difference, but there were some technical changes that were intended to address some grammatical and conceptual issues that led to a difference in this compared to what had been introduced in the governor's supplemental budget for transportation. I've got a outstanding question to the department about whether this achieves their underlying policy goals that they had originally proposed with this. So there might still be an open question. I believe the intent matches up with the bill that Representative Hansen is carrying, but obviously there is a language difference.
Okay. Madam
So,
Chair.
if you don't mind, you want to go to Representative Hansen? Okay, let's go to Representative Hansen. Let's get some clarity here. Representative Hansen.
I think this is Hanson J rather than Hanson R.
Oh, okay.
Is it mine?
So it's not Rick. Okay, sorry, Chair.
No.
Okay, this is,
Garofalo.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Yes, Chair Hansen.
this is a benefit, hold on just a minute.
I'll explain later. While we're waiting for Representative Hanson.
Okay.
I just, a
Representative Gruffalo.
question for Mr. Burris, if you still have. Mr. Burris, is this language prospective only, or does it cover previous cases?
Mr. Perez.
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, the language is silent on the timing of when deaths would occur. So I'd have to give that a little bit of thought of how far back.
Okay. So,
Representative Garofalo.
Madam Chair, Representative Hornstein, just so I can fill in the committee on this. So this is language that I worked on. It's something that's a priority to me. So I actually took the link because majority party usually carries, you have a better chance of success if the majority party carries it. So I had asked a member of the DFL to carry it. I think this is Representative Hanson, and I believe Representative Moeller has a bill that's similar. That's the origins of this. And so,
Correct.
So Chairman Hornstein, the difficulty is that at one point, whatever point you draw the line here, there will be people that are covered by this, families who lost a family member, and those who are not covered by it. I want to raise that issue with you about when this is effective, because it would have a dramatic impact on people who've lost a loved one. And I just want to work with you on that to make sure that we can get that in there. So I don't want to delay the proceedings, but that was that's the dialogue around this language. And I apologize. I did not catch that this language was in there until we were in committee, so I would have brought it up with you. So.
Chair Hornstein.
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo,
Madam Chair.
Oh, we have a Representative Hanson, but I will say on the record, I'm happy to work with you on that.
Thanks, Frank.
All right.
Madam Chair.
Okay, so Chair Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for the confusion because there were two bills that were put in, one authored by myself, and Representative Garofalo is correct. This deals with a South St. Paul officer who was lost through suicide and lives in, I believe, lived in Representative Garofalo's district. And Representative Moeller also had put in the bill, and that was one that I thought had been moving. And so I would just back up Representative Garofalo's statements and comments about this tragic situation that we're trying to provide a remedy for.
Thank you, Chair Hanson. So what I hear is that Representative Garofalo will work with Chair Hornstein to clean up this language, to get it to a place that is agreeable. All right. Is there any Representative Petersburg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, I'd like to just say thank you to Chair Hornstein for allowing me to work with him this year. This has been a great opportunity, and we've communicated very well. I do see in this bill, though, that there are two glaring errors that are, in my opinion, are something that we should have really have dealt with. First of all, is with the surplus that we've had this year, this was the time to be able to invest more dollars into our transportation system, and that would have been through the auto part sales tax. And Mr. Chair, you actually passed the bill out of our committee and put it in taxes. It's not in the tax bill, and it's not in this bill. And in my opinion, that's a mistake. That's something in which we should have got those funds in. But Mr. Chair, I also know that the limits of what kind of quote moving target that you had didn't allow it for it as well. But I think that's something that we need to all reconsider later down the way, if we can increase those moving targets, because I think that's something that really ought to be done, and it gives us an opportunity to give a shot in the arm to transportation into the future as well, because those are ongoing revenues, and they're going to be increasing revenues as sales tax increases as well. The other issue, and Mr. Chair, you can comment on that later, but the other issue is you and I co-authored a bill really looking for kind of what we would consider as more of the mismanagement of Met Council in regards to the Southwest Light Rail. And I think that was appropriate, and it indicates, to me at least, that Met Council has a great degree of concern, or at least I have concern, with how they are managing projects. And yet your bill here has quite a few more bus rapid transit programs and others that I think may be more advantageous if we were to wait to find out what the legislative auditor had to say in regards to management and control of bidding and so forth. You know, and I know there's going to be people that are saying, well, if we don't do it now, we're just going to lose a year or two. But you know, over the years, I've learned that when high-pressure salesmen try to say, you've only got today to make that decision, tomorrow will be too late, usually you ought to wait. And so I'm concerned that we are putting forth projects and funding some of them that, in which we may have unintended consequences into the future. And if it means that we have to wait even just part of a year or so, I think that would be better until we get the legislative audit report to see if there are other issues that need to be corrected before we go ahead with it. So those are two main glaring mistakes, I think. There are a lot of good things in this bill, Mr. Chair, but I think there are some that we really are missing the boat here on this particular bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Seeing no further, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just thank you, Representative Hornstein, Chair Hornstein. I just have a quick question about the fee increases. You've got a $3 fee increase on Class D licenses and then an $8 for Real ID. And I'm just curious because we have a huge budget surplus, obviously, and where are those fees going to go? What is that for? And what does it generate, I guess is the biggest question.
Chair Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Representative O'Neill. I appreciate the question. So last year, there were a number of bills that were addressing some of the issues that, in particular, deputy registrars around the state were facing in terms of additional workloads and shortfalls, of course, because of COVID and a variety of issues. And these have been around our committee for many years. Rather than sort of kind of sift through those issues last year, in the conference committee, Chairman Newman and I decided to seek the advice of Mr. Rick King, who had been very helpful in our transition from MNLARS to our new driver registration system. So we charged him with doing a report to address a number of the issues related to driver and vehicle services. And so these particular recommendations come out of that bipartisan report, or bipartisan directed report, and these provisions line up with what's happening in the Senate bill. And so, you know, a variety of different options we had, and so I chose for sort of a modest fee increase for those purposes, and that will really assist our deputy registrars.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And how much does it generate?
Chair Hornstein.
Mr. Lee already knew that I was going to be asking him, so he's going to be
He's very good.
answering that question. Madam Chair.
Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Madam Chair and members, Andrew Lee from House Fiscal Staff. And Madam Chair and Representative O'Neill, the estimated increase in those fee changes are on the spreadsheet on line 223 on page 4. That would be an increase to the Driver Services Special Revenue Fund account of approximately $511,000 a year. That's the amount of fee increase that is estimated to accrue on this, if transactions go through the state system. But if the transaction occurs through the driver's agent, then the driver's agent would retain that fee increase.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was the next thing I was going to ask is, when do the deputy registrars actually get the fee? So if they transact it, then they keep it. If they don't transact it, they don't keep any of it. Does any of it that goes to the state then come back to the deputy registrars too, or is it just only when they transact?
Mr. Lee.
Madam Chair and Representative O'Neill, under the proposal in the independent expert review article of the bill, there is a provision that would have a percentage of online and mail transactions. A portion of that fee revenue would then go to the deputy registrars. That it doesn't exist in current law, but if this were to be enacted, then there would be that mechanism where a portion of mail-in and online transactions would go to the deputy registrars.
Representative O'Neill.
Okay, good, because our deputy registrars have been, as you just said, just going out of business, literally, all across the state, because they are private entities, so, okay, so that's how you're dealing with that. And the last question I have, and I'll let this go, but I couldn't let this go without a couple quick concerns. Here we are again, I was on your committee a long time ago, Chair Hornstein, and way back then, 10 years ago, we were talking about light rail to Duluth. And, in the committee, we talked about how it was just college students that were going to take the train, because we kept saying, well, who's going to ride the train from Duluth to the Twin Cities? Who's actually going to ride it? And back then, that's all they could come up with was maybe college students going back to college. So that's of concern. But then you couple that with only $4 million for township roads. I mean, think about how many township roads there are in the entire state of Minnesota, and we're giving them $4 million. So we're going to put in light rail up to Duluth that no one's going to ride, and we've got just such a small amount of money for township roads. And maybe I'll just ask this question since we have experts up here. How many miles of township roads do we have, and basically how much is that per mile?
Wow. Chair Hornstein or Mr. Lee?
Madam Chair, I don't have that that data at my fingertips, but we certainly could provide it to the committee and to Representative O'Neill. I know, Representative Garofalo, you should know that.
Yeah, right.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure it's pennies. I'm sure it's pennies per mile because it's just so little. But I just thought that was a really interesting. And then there's no money for the corridors of commerce, which of course you and I worked on, again, 10 years ago. That was very successful. So we have no money for corridors of commerce. We have this light rail train to Duluth that no one's going to ride. And we have $4 million for all of those township roads, which is literally pennies per mile. So this is an interesting bill, let's just say. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Johnson.
Chair Mariani, or Chair Moran, Representative Ornstein. I was just going through the bill again some more, and I just spotted a couple different things that I'd like you to explain, if you could. There's funding for a pilot project on 64.18, Section 58. Speed safety camera pilot project. Can you explain what that is and what's the purpose of that?
Chair Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question, Representative Johnson. Yes, as I mentioned in my opening comments, one of the themes of our committee was safety. Safety for drivers, safety for pedestrians, safety for all road users. We actually had a week's worth of hearing. We heard from law enforcement, we heard from citizens, we heard from public officials, we heard from safety groups. And it became very clear that that this demanded action. And so the Department of Public Safety, Driver and Vehicle Services came to us with a proposal based on some of the concerns that were raised at this week's worth of hearings, two entire hearings devoted to this. And they came to us with, I thought, a very good proposal to enhance the Towards Zero Deaths program by creating a task force that would be really looking at ways in which we, through public education, through other mechanisms, begin to address the 502 deaths on our roads. And again, we have the pandemic of COVID, but we have the epidemic of traffic deaths. And we've had, Representative Johnson, one of the success stories is our distracted driving legislation that we've had over the years, the texting ban, the hands-free. That is a area in which deaths and injuries have gone down, but speeding in particular, but also impaired driving, those have gone up. We've had a number of pedestrian deaths and fatalities. So we are really looking at this as a way to address safety. And there's other ways we address safety in the bill, but specifically that's how this came about. Representative Johnson.
Representative Johnson.
Chair Moran, Representative Hornstein. I understand this. We had traffic cameras in the past that were ruled unconstitutional because of the way our laws are written. I'm just wondering, if this is just to have a study, try to figure out how it can be done within our current statutes that are in the Constitution?
Yes,
Make sure that-
Madam Chair,
Chair
you're
Hornstein.
referring to the work zone safety provision in this bill, and we are not prescribing any specific strategy on that. We're just asking DPS and MnDOT to report back to us in a year what their implementation plan would be. Again, the work zone safety issue is another one, another sub-theme of our safety theme in this bill. We have had, again, a number of construction workers, officers, others that have been killed or injured specifically in work zones. So cameras may be an option, but we are not prescribing that specifically in this bill.
Representative Johnson.
Chair Moran, Chair Hornstein, thank you for that information. It's unfortunate that we are short so many law enforcement officers across the state. The attacks on law enforcement has caused a huge shortage. We had many of them retire, which affected the pension bill. Many of them resigned. Last I heard, we're short between 1,000 and 1,500 officers across the state. We also have, because of the attacks on law enforcement, we have officers that are no longer doing proactive law enforcement. It's just responding to the call. On my travels down here from Cambridge, it's regularly, I have vehicles go by me at well over 100 miles an hour. And I rarely see a state patrol, any county, any city squad cars, because the attacks that have gone on law enforcement. Until we get that straightened out, I don't care what you do, nothing's going to happen because people don't care. The speed that people are driving at and the way they're driving is out of control. When I'm down here driving around St. Paul, I see cars regularly going through red lights, stop signs, pedestrians having to jump out of the way because we don't have any law enforcement officers to provide traffic control. They're responding to the other calls. I didn't think I'd have an opportunity to talk about public safety on a transportation bill, but your bill is pointing out the problems with what's going on because of the attack on law enforcement. It's a great profession. They're out there doing their job to protect people. I'm going to get off that one now. And another concern I have is Section 59. It is a plan to implement a mileage tax. For those of you who live in the metro area and drive the transit or use transit, it doesn't affect you. But in the greatest part of Minnesota, greater Minnesota, it's huge. Many people have 20-minute drive just one way to go to the grocery store. That's not counting the drive to work. The drive to go pick up your kids at school events because they no longer have buses or activity buses to bring the kids home. Driving 20 miles, actually, I have one person in my area, they had to drive 33 miles one way to go vote on a school bond referendum. Mileage tax is interesting when you don't have to drive. But for those that have to drive because of where they live, it's huge. I'm really concerned that they're even talking about a mileage tax. So, like I say, with what's in this bill, there's no way I can support it.
Did you want to respond, Chair Hornstein?
Well, there's several responses to several comments. If people have additional ones, we can get those out on the table. Otherwise, I could respond to what's been said already.
All right, thank you. So seeing no further discussion, Chair Hornstein, would you have any closing comments?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I appreciate the discussion and of course, the interest in transportation that everybody shares on both sides of the aisle. Let me just respond to a couple of comments, and then I'll make a very brief closing statement. To Representative Petersburg's concerns, he pointed out correctly that one of the ways we're addressing some of the issues with Southwest is light rail is through perhaps one of the most extensive legislative audits we've ever had in the state. Thanks to the legislature and the bipartisan interest in this, we have 17 different areas that we have asked the legislative auditor to examine. That bill was passed, and through our established legislative audit process, all of you, again, I believe on a bipartisan basis, have asked for this audit through the process that's been set up through our own legislative audit. So I'm looking forward to those results. And I would just say, Representative Petersburg and members, that what we have in this bill related to transit is simply giving the Met Council some resources to study some additional arterial bus rapid transit lines. We don't have funding specifically for those lines, but this has been a very, very successful, flexible, cost-effective transit solution that has been supported by both sides of the aisle. And so we're simply asking for that to be studied further, some additional lines around the metro area. The other transit provisions in this bill are simply enhancements. We have some money for additional shelters and other ways in which we can enhance local bus service. The suburban area, for example, there's a very successful project that allows sort of a Lyft Uber service for the last miles. This is something that Minnesota Valley Transit and Southwest Transit have pioneered. So these are the kinds of transit enhancements we have in this legislation. And so, that is, important for the region. And Again, I think that, as you correctly point out, Representative Petersburg, we do have a governance issue with the Met Council. That's why I've once again introduced a bill to elect the Met Council. And I hope we can advance that. I think there's some other ideas around perhaps a council of governments. I think that Representative Nash, Representative Albright have all worked on and thought about this over the years. I hope we can come together. Maybe there's still some things we can do this session on that. But I have introduced House File 1122 to elect the Met Council. So I hope we can do that. There is an issue. You've correctly identified that governance issue. To Representative O'Neill, I know what you're getting at in terms of the issue with the Northern Lights Express. I disagree with you on the ridership, but I do want to just clarify on the record. You had mentioned that it's a light rail project. It is actually considered passenger rail, and passenger rail is very different than commuter rail, different than North Star, different than Southwest and the Green Line and the Blue Line. So it's passenger rail. There will be a lot of enhancements to the freight corridor as well that we'll be paying for, and a significant change over past. You mentioned we've been talking about this for 10 years. There's a very, very significant change now, which is that Amtrak will be taking this on. And the cost has actually gone down because of that. And so we're matching federal money. As for townships, I would like to fund townships more. However, they do receive some support from our existing transportation funding through the Highway User Trust Distribution Fund. Small cities do not, and so therefore we have a position for small cities that is significant in this bill and ongoing. And we're continuing to search for ways in which we can have ongoing dedicated funding for small cities. So I appreciate you raising that, and I wanted to clarify that. In terms of the Corridors of Commerce program, we have a really significant policy enhancement in this bill that's been championed by Representative Torkelson. And I appreciate his work on this. The Corridors of Commerce program is successful but needs to be updated. So we have significant policy initiative in that is bipartisan in nature, different from what the Senate has, so we'll have to see what we come up with, but we have a really important provision around corridors in this bill, and we did have bonding for it last year. And then finally, related to your concern, Representative Johnson, about the task force that we've set up on the mileage fee. I want to be clear, this only relates to electric vehicles. We have, in the past, resisted efforts. The Senate has imposed huge fees on electric vehicle owners. I believe we should be incenting electric vehicles. We do have a position for electric vehicle infrastructure and electric buses in this bill, really important for the climate crisis that we're going through. But we wanted to come to the conference committee with at least an idea, which is to study, to have a task force to study if a mileage-based fee makes sense for electric vehicles. This is an initiative from Representative Elkins. So rather than just sort of prima facie saying no on this, we at least want to study the idea for a mileage-based fee for electric vehicles only. And so that's what this is. I wanted to clarify, this is not a sweeping mileage fee, although, Representative Johnson, I do personally believe that in the long term, with the gas tax revenue going down, we will need some other mechanism to fund roads and bridges. A mileage-based fee is one of them. However, that is not in this bill. This is simply a study group to look at a mileage-based fee for electric vehicles only. So members, with that, I just wanted to thank you for your consideration and reiterate that this bill is comprehensive. It covers all parts of the state. It covers all modes of transportation. We have important safety enhancements. We address mobility. We address the economic development potential that transportation has. With transportation being the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions, we address the climate crisis. Transportation also needs to be looked at through an equity lens. We continue what we did on that work last year, really looking at the equity issues, particularly with our transit and pedestrian safety provisions in this bill. So it's a great bill. I ask for your support, and I thank you for your consideration.
All right, well, thank you, Chair Hornstein, for your committee's work in support of a multimodal transportation system that meets the needs of Minnesotans across the state, as well as addressing the problems with the DVS functions. With that, the Chair will temporarily lay House File 1683 as amended over. Thank you.